Good morning. Let's just start with opening with a prayer. So if you'll just take a moment and join me, allow yourself to get comfortable, and if you will just softly close your eyes and center yourself right here, right now. Just pause. Pause the thinking and pause the busyness of our mind, anything other than this very moment. And I know right here and right now that I consciously put my focus on that one divine presence that we call God, that one beauty and love and peace and tranquility. And I choose to center myself and ground myself in this perfect moment of stillness. And knowing that I am created in the image and likeness of this beauty, of this love, and of this tranquility. Knowing that there is an infinite intelligence, a divine wisdom all about me and around me, in which I am centered. Knowing that I can tap into that wisdom and into that intelligence. I can draw from it. I can be guided and led by that which is greater than the little me, by love, by God. So I open myself up. I am open, welcoming, and inviting to connecting to this wisdom, to connecting to this divine intelligence, and choosing to be led by it. No matter how it shows up, no matter the form, no matter the vehicle, that this wisdom is made available to me, and I know that as I draw from it, that my life improves, my choices improve, my thoughts, my words, my actions are all as a result of me being connected to my best self, to my higher self. So right here and right now in this moment, I know that this is available to me, and I know that I have the understanding of how to use it and how to apply it to my life. So filled with gratitude, with my heart open, blessing and praising this thing called God, I simply let go. I release. I turned it over to God, and now I can declare with absolute certainty, and so it is. So what I was wanting to address today is the topic of intuition. And intuition is something that we've known it or heard it as soul whispers, as an inner compass, as that quiet voice, as a gentle nudge, a hunch, a gut feeling. Sometimes it's just a knowing. And what I would like to look at today is, can we rely upon these hunches or these gut feelings as a form of intuitive wisdom and guidance, or is it something unreliable and it's something that we really shouldn't trust and we should dismiss it? So what I'd like to do today is kind of look at the strengths and the weaknesses, maybe the pros and cons of intuition. In his book by the title Blink, the author Malcolm Gladwell says that our brain uses two different strategies in processing and making sense of things. One strategy is slow, conscious, logical, and it's very deliberate. It's a definitive analysis of large amounts of information. And the other way is smart, quick, below the surface of our awareness, and it really needs very little information. Studies have revealed that our intuition is sending us information long before our conscious analytical brain is aware. In one study, the participants played what was a rigged card game, and there were 2 different decks of cards. Now, one deck of card was an absolute minefield. I mean, there were big losses early on, but there were even bigger losses. There were big wins early on, and then there were even bigger losses that took place. The other deck had smaller wins, but over the long run, overall, there were fewer losses. So there was kind of the deck that was risky and the deck that was safe. So these study participants were hooked up to monitoring equipment that would measure the sweat glands in the palms of their hands. And so that they were playing this game, and how long do you think it took before these participants knew what the heck was going on? Most of them, it took about 50 cards, and they could verbalize something to the effect of like, I don't know exactly what's happening, but something's not right. And then after about 80 cards, they could actually explain. They could give a reason. They could say why they preferred one deck more than the other. They would say something like, this deck is good and this deck is bad. But guess what? It was after only 10 cards that the sweat gland activity in the palms of their hands increased each and every time they drew a card from the risky, bad deck. So much so that their behavior changed, and they were drawing more and more cards from the good deck, from the safe deck, before their analytical brain was even aware that they were doing that. And before they were even consciously making a choice, I got to choose this one instead of that one. Our body is a living communication device. And studies by a Dr. Darrell Bim of Cornell University, he's a social psychologist, he demonstrated that physiological responses occurred the majority of the time before the causal stimulus was even presented to the study participants. In his study, participants sat in front of a computer screen, and they viewed images on the screen. They were being randomly selected by the computer. Now, some of these images were neutral. They were like landscapes in nature. Some of these images were erotic. Some of these images were bloody and gruesome. So he, in 9 different experiments over the course of 8 years, his studies on precognition and premonition revealed the body's physiology, now whether that was the heart rate changing, or the respiratory rate changing, or the sweat gland activity in their hands changing, but the body's physiology anticipated an upcoming image before the participant was shown the picture and before the computer had randomly selected the next picture. They had a body response. So this might explain stories that we've heard about someone making a decision or a choice that saved their life or avoided some terrible accident, like a firefighter who exited a burning house just minutes before the whole roof collapsed, and it would have totally engulfed him in flames. Or someone who didn't board a flight, and then that plane goes on and ends up crashing and killing everybody on board. I once had a massage therapist, and she shared with me how she was up at the Del Amo Mall with her husband and her 2 young children. And she was suddenly overcome with such a strong feeling that they needed to get out of there right away. And within less than a couple hours, there was a shooting in the mall, and the whole mall was shut down by the Torrance Police Department. In his book, Start With Why, Simon Sinek discusses the things that make people like Martin Luther King and Steve Jobs such inspirational leaders. Steve Jobs was the co-founder of Apple, which to this day is still rated as the #1 most innovative company. And Apple is a company that launched the first iPhone, the first smartphone in 2007. Steve Jobs was quoted as saying, "Intuition is more powerful than intellect." In a 2005 Stanford commencement speech, he told the graduates, "Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become." In his book, Start With Why, Simon Sinek addresses the biology of the human brain in a section of the book called Gut Decisions Don't Happen in Your Stomach. So what he explains, this would be like if we're looking down on the top of someone's skull. In a cross section, it's like if we lift the cap off and we're looking down at the brain. He explains that it's the outer brain, and that's called the neocortex. It's the neocortex that's responsible for rational, analytical thought and language. Deep inside that intersection is the limbic brain, and it's responsible for our feelings, for our behavior and decision-making, but it has no capacity for language. The rational brain can understand vast amounts of complicated information, but he says it does not drive our behavior. The decisions are first made by our inner brain, and then the outer brain, the language part, rationalizes our decision. Since the part of the brain that controls our feelings has no capacity for language, he says that's why it's so hard to put our gut feelings into words. You know, we say, we just go, it just doesn't feel right. A neuroscientist by the name of Richard Restack says, when you force people to make decisions with only the rational part of their brain, they almost always end up overthinking it. We've heard the term analysis paralysis. You keep hashing it over and over and over again, but there's that hesitancy to actually make a final decision. We've heard the term, as I said, the analysis paralysis, but what he says is that the gut decisions tend to be faster, and what he believes is of higher quality. Remember in school when you were taking a multiple choice test and you were encouraged, go with your first gut, the first answer. And it's usually the first answer, for whatever reason, is usually, more times than not, the correct answer. Simon Sinek shares in his book that we make assumptions about the world based on sometimes incomplete or faulty information, and our behavior is affected by those assumptions and those beliefs. We make decisions based on what we think we know. We want to make educated decisions, so most of us try to gather more info. Logic dictates more information, and more data is the key to making a wise decision. But data doesn't always help, especially if a flawed assumption set the whole process in motion. There are contributing factors that exist outside of our rational, analytical, information-hungry brain. A couple Sundays ago, you may remember Reverend Catherine touched on an example of unconscious bias. One type is affinity bias, and that's when we include in our social circle those individuals who are just like me. They have similar backgrounds, maybe similar education. They hold similar opinions, maybe the same political affiliation. They even tend to look like us. And we move farther away from individuals who hold opposing viewpoints and opinions, who have completely different backgrounds and maybe a completely different education, and look very different than us. Confirmation bias is another example of unconscious bias, where we look for facts to confirm our opinion and our belief. Remember the whole thing? The rational brain is trying to rationalize an opinion or a decision that we've already made with that limbic brain. So we look to confirm our opinion or our already held belief or assumption, and we tend to overlook the importance or we disregard evidence that contradicts our opinion. We tend to turn a blind eye just to prove that we are right. Another bias is age bias, where we have stereotypes and discrimination of which we may be totally unaware. You know, those millennials, they always have their noses in electronic devices when they're at work. Those baby boomers, they barely know how to use a cell phone, and they just won't listen to new ideas. We make a generalization about a whole group or a whole generation. In the book by the name Hidden Brain, Shankar Vedantam talks about influences that manipulate us without our awareness. He refers to these influences as unconscious biases. He says that the conscious brain excels in new and novel situations because it's rational and it's careful and it's analytical. But once a problem is understood and we've learned how to solve it, it just doesn't make sense to keep rethinking to that same problem each and every time that we are going to address it. For instance, once we learn to ride a bike, the next time and those times after that we get on, we don't need to think, okay, now where do I put my hands? Where do I put my feet? How do I shift my balance? You know, we don't have to rethink it. It becomes more automatic. So the hidden brain tends to be a master of shortcuts, and we use it to carry out the mundane daily activities in our life, like brushing our teeth, like driving a car. I don't know, my first car was a Volkswagen Beetle, and it was a stick shift. And, you know, I mean, fewer and fewer people are driving stick shifts these days. But I remember in the beginning needing to be really, really conscious about, you know, watching the tachometer and, like, you know, what was the needle showing before I would shift into the next gear, and what speed was I at. And then, you know, eventually I got, and the clutch and the release, I got to the point where you're just driving and you're not thinking about it anymore. Once you've learned it, the analytical brain doesn't have to keep dissecting it and going through it over and over again. So the conscious brain is slow and deliberate, and the hidden brain is fast and makes quick approximations. You know, something like, well, it's close enough. You know, it's not necessarily a generalization, but it's like, it's close enough, so we just kind of like, we lump it together and we dismiss it and we move on. The hidden brain sacrifices accuracy for speed. The hidden brain jumps to conclusions and makes associations that might not be pertinent or accurate in each and every situation. It notices things that regularly appear together, so that once we see one thing, we begin to automatically we expect the other, because we've seen that happen so many times. The hidden brain's power lies in the fact that its influence is subtle, and people then, they don't even realize it's happening, and then they rationalize away their bias. The presence of implicit bias has been examined and discussed as to what influence it played in the 2008 United States presidential election. Now, Barack Obama was elected as the first black man, the first black president of the United States. And even though he won, there was such a discrepancy between what the pre-election polls said and the final outcome. So they said, well, either so many people changed their mind at the very last minute, or they didn't tell the truth to the pollsters because they didn't want to appear looking racist. There's also another, it's called the Obama effect, and that term is now used to describe the beneficial consequence of an individual. That individual, Barack Obama, overcame negative stereotypes and racial unconscious biases of the voters. The author of The Hidden Brain says, there's nothing that we can do about the existence of the hidden brain, but there is something we can do about our actions and our choices. In his opinion, we can choose to allow our actions to be guided by reason rather than instinct. He insists that reason is our only defense against unconscious bias. When our conscious brain and our hidden brain sit down for our chat, he says that the conscious brain wins the debate every time because of what he calls reasoned analysis. He gives the example of the conscious mind being the pilot and the hidden brain being the autopilot on an airplane. And what he says is that the pilot can always overrule the autopilot, except when the pilot's not paying attention or the pilot has gone to sleep. When our conscious attention is distracted and it's not restraining the automatic associations of the hidden brain, the biases of the hidden brain show up loudly. Under stress and pressure, the conscious brain can get overwhelmed and fail to mask the biases of the hidden brain. The pilot fails to override the autopilot. Under stress, people regress, and they are more vulnerable to exposing biases present in their hidden brain. So it sounds like he's cautioning us against relying on our gut, on our hunch, on our inner voice. He sees more value in our conscious, rational brain than in what he calls the hidden brain. He says that we're always vulnerable to unconscious biases, and we need to be vigilant to consciously address them. So which is it? Do we go with our gut, or do we be guided by our intellect? Historically, Western culture has generally denigrated intuition as being less valuable and less reliable than logic. But wait a minute. Albert Einstein is widely regarded as a genius, and he said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." Rick Snyder is the author of a book called Decisive Intuition. Use your gut instincts to make smart business decisions. He says that we make better decisions when we integrate intuition with critical thinking. Aha, now there's a concept. Intuition is our deeper intelligence that is able to read the room and extract data faster than the conscious mind can analyze. So instead of either or, could it be this and? In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes tells us this about intuition. The spirit of man seems to have an external and an internal perception. Its external perception is by appearance, the world of the five senses, the facts. What can I see, taste, touch, smell, feel? And Holmes says that the internal perception is through intuition. The intelligence in an animal is what we call instinct. The same but more highly developed intelligence in man we call intuition. Holmes says intuition is God in man, and just as instinct guides the animal, so will intuition guide man. We have the mind of Christ, which means each one of us has immediate access to the intelligence of the universe through pure inspiration or intuition. But intuition remains in the background, and it waits for our recognition. Our intuitive voice doesn't shout to get our attention, it whispers. The key to connecting to our intuitive voice is to create quiet space. Now, this might be meditation, but it could also be a walk alone in nature. It could be sitting quietly without being distracted by our electronic devices. It could be gardening. It could be just sitting and savoring a cup of tea. It's noise, busyness, multitasking, stress, negative emotions, they all interrupt and block us from hearing that quiet voice. Perhaps you've heard, there you are. Perhaps you've heard one of our own, Ruth Wagner, share her experience with her quiet voice. And I've asked her, and she said it was okay for me to share. What was happening is that Ruth was experiencing severe neck pain, and she had tried many things, and she just could not get lasting pain relief. So she attended the labyrinth, and she had set in her mind seeking the answer to resolving this pain. So when she was driving home after participating in the guided group meditation and after walking the labyrinth, she noticed a personalized license plate on a car in front of her, and the license plate read, Ice Pack. And that so resonated with her that when she got home, she tried it. Guess where she got her pain relief. In living our most skilled lives, in my personal opinion, we want to strike a balance between the messages of our head and the messages of our heart. The well of creativity flows from the subconscious mind, but Ernest Holmes tells us that it's the self-knowing mind, and that's the conscious mind in man. It's the self-knowing mind that is the instrument which perceives and cognizes truth. All illumination, inspiration, and realization must come through the self-knowing mind in order to be made manifest in man. It's the conscious mind that chooses. The conscious mind can choose to disregard, or the conscious mind can pay attention to that hunch or that gut feeling. It's the conscious mind can tap what is coming through the subconscious mind. So choices and decisions made by our conscious mind draw from objective facts of the world of five senses, as well as from those perceptions, those feelings, and those nudges that are received from the subconscious mind. Ernest Holmes says, to learn how to think is to learn how to live if man thinks correctly. So I believe thinking correctly is to responsibly tap all avenues of and sources of knowledge and information, both those from our head and from our heart and our gut. I see the value in both our conscious and our subconscious mind, and I choose not to devalue, dismiss, or disregard either. We know the conscious mind and the subconscious mind by different characteristics. Each is an aspect of the one whole mind. Just like the black and white of the yin and yang are two complementary aspects of the one whole. Just like the two wings of a bird is what balances it, which allows the bird to fly skillfully and properly. So both the conscious analytical reasoning mind and the subconscious feeling intuitive mind are of benefit to me in thinking correctly and in me living a skilled life. So instead of all or nothing, I'm voting for this and instead of either or. I choose not to toss out the baby with the bathwater. How about you? So that's my study of intuition. And now this is our moment of sharing. So, do you want to? You will? Okay, we're going to wait for the cheat sheet. There we go. All right, so join me, please. Divine love consecrates my gift. It goes forth to heal, to bless, and to prosper all those who give and all those who receive. I rejoice in the sharing of my good, and I release my gift with love. Ruthie, do you want this one? Sorry. Thanks. And now we have some time for questions or comments, any observations that anyone had as a result of us looking at this topic of intuition and conscious and subconscious mind. Grant has a mic, so we can hear. It would be nice for everyone who's listening in to be able to hear the question or the comment.
Well, it's not really a question, but I wanted to thank you so much for your message. And I was thinking, I had a complicated situation recently, and I was trying with my analytical mind to figure everything out, and things just didn't match the information I was given. That did not work. I even asked an attorney to look at it, and he said, well, this doesn't go with that, and da-da-da, you know. And then finally, I just kept looking and looking, and I found a bit of information that went, oh, I get it. But it's like it felt so whole because it fit with what I felt, you know, what my sympathetic nervous system was knowing, but I didn't have the reason. And so I really liked what you were saying about it isn't either or, it's both, because for me that is what worked, is both, you know. So
right, exactly. Because there's some people that are totally led, you know, they just trust their gut completely, and then there's other people who are, they're very analytical, and it has to make, you know, sense, and they have to feel like they reason with it. But to me, it's like, where's that balance? And something that I read, it was talking about whether it's an intuitive guidance or it's your ego. That when you make a decision or you have that feeling with the intuitive guidance, there's usually this feeling of peace, like, that's it. That, you know, and it's usually something that's supporting your unfolding or your development or your growth. If it's ego, there's usually that fear, you know, you're avoiding something. It's like, well, my gut told me not to, you know. So I understand the whole thing about, you know, the person who said she had to get out of the mall, and yeah, that feeling was uncomfortable, and she wanted to protect, or, you know, just, she didn't even know. It was just like, I got it, we have to get out of here. Felt unsafe. But generally, sometimes it's like, well, is this just my ego telling me this? It's like, well, if I go with this decision, is there a sense of peace and relief and resolve? And I feel like this is an expansion of who and what I am? Or is it being more, you know, fearful and rejecting something because it's a threat to me? That's a threat to my way of life or my way of thinking. Again, that's a generalization, but. Does anybody else have a comment or, yeah?
I was just going to say this was really fun. Do you have a class that you did this in? Because, you know, when you're going through everything, there's like I have 9 million questions for each part of it, so it's hard to come up with a particular question. But you know, you're trying to tie them all together, but the information kind of goes too fast. I mean, every single thing that you're saying is something you've kind of looked into, or I have looked into at a certain amount in my life, but I don't have it researched enough to kind of really have the understanding that I want, right? So anyway, it's like, it'd be great almost to, we could do this again one time, but instead of you're going through all your things, that we can stop and question the sections while you're there, right?
You know, that was my idea, but Grant said, no, no, no. On Wednesday, you don't have that long to do that.
Grant, we're going to have a 3-hour session next time.
Again, I think it just boils down to, it's this and. It's not either or. I'm either led totally by my head or I'm led totally by my heart. How do we, they're both sources of information and wisdom. How do we integrate it and balance it out?
Yeah, well, it was really fun. You know, everything is tied together, right? And so, you know, it's really fun to be encouraged all the time to, you know, just follow what you feels right? And so, anyway, those are all great things and need to be gone over a few times, you know, so that we sink ourselves into it a little bit to where we follow that and not be afraid to follow your intuition a little bit more, you know.
Just like that affinity bias, I would think those of us who are head-led, and I know I am, I'm more of a detective. I try to analyze something and investigate it. Probably the people I surround myself are more, with are more head-led. And then there's the touchy-feely, sometimes the head-led will dismiss them as woo-woo. But the touchy-feely, those who trust their gut, they're going to be more comfortable around other intuitive beings. So I think we can kind of recognize which one we are stronger in or we're more dominant in. And then I think it's just a matter of being open and like letting the other one in a little bit, tapping into it a bit.
Well, yeah, I see a lot of life as being something where you have to, just believe and follow it. I have a lot of friends that are what you might call atheist or whatever, and they're kind of scientific type minds, and they have to explain everything. And I'm going, look, if you went back 50 years ago, everything that we know now were things that we, said we figured out now weren't true. Those were beliefs that weren't true. And
Right.
50 years from now, what you're believing now is going to be completely different, right? And you have to just let yourself go and realize that we only know what we know, and a lot of what we think we know isn't even isn't
Right.
even true, right? And
Right.
so, but for them to be comfortable in life, they have to, hey, this is this and that is that. And I go, look, all we
proof.
did is we got a rock, and we looked at the rock and said, that's a rock. That's this is a science. From what we know right now, that's about where scientists are. We from what we know 50 years now, we know almost nothing, right? All right. I mean, and we've skyrocketed in the last 50 years. We learned more than what we learned in thousands of years, right? Because of these weird advances in the computer and other things. Well, actually, that'd be interesting sometime to cover the skyrocketing of where we are now, right, as opposed to where, because, we flatline, or not flatline, but we're slowly evolving.
Plateaued.
Plateaued, well, we were slowly evolving forever, but all of a sudden the rocket went straight up, and we're shooting to the moon, or whatever, so to speak, right now, right? So it'd be great to cover all the reasons why that is, right? And I'm honestly scared to death of where we're going right now with the artificial intelligence, and they really have these artificial intelligence actually having feelings, and I'm sitting there going, look, man, we're doing all this stuff and causing our own extinction, because if these little beings don't like us anymore, they're 10 times smarter than us to eliminate us from the planet.
Did you hear about the punitive robot that grabbed the 7-year-old chess players and broke his finger because the kid made the move too soon? You will follow the rules. Is there anyone here who, I mean, okay, you don't have to single yourself out, but is there anyone here who has never had an intuitive hunch? I mean, they can honestly say, I've never experienced a gut feeling or a nudge that, I should maybe entertain that or try that. I know in my career work, I was a physical therapist, and I remember more times than not, I would go, what made me ask that question? I don't even know, but something just moved me to ask a question of the patient, and it was what needed to be said or shared, and it was just that is bizarre. That wasn't my usual routine of conducting an assessment or doing an evaluation. I mean, I remember one time it was something, I don't know, it had something to do with the bank or whatever, and it was this person just went on and on and on and on and on, and it was that was the question, that was the topic that needed to come up. So sometimes I just go, well, it really wasn't me, but something nudged me to speak or say that without me dismissing it. Yeah, my intuition. Does anyone else have anything?
Oh, I was going to say, I think everybody has intuition. Maybe they didn't call it that or whatever, but I have, I'm always trying to figure out, because all these things guide me all the time. So I'm thinking, is that me, my gut guiding me, or is there some intelligence outside that's kind of, again, when I'm going along, they say, Steve, you
But
need
just
to go
like
to
I
the
said,
left
it's
right
the
here or
conscious mind in man that can tap into that. So when you're saying, is that guiding me? Well, it's something there, maybe below the surface of our conscious awareness, that that's available for us to tap if we want. But yeah, did you have a comment or a question?
Oh, I do. Thank you. You know, I also enjoyed it. I've read a few of the books that you were referencing. Great books. I know a few of those he was asking. There's podcasts. Hidden Brain has a great podcast.
Which one? I'm sorry, who does?
Hidden Brain
Okay, yeah,
is a
uh-huh.
podcast. My question was, you know, I'm very intuitive, and I follow that path. I have a lot of practices that I turn to. As far as decision making, you know, I feel I make great decisions. I've consciously think them out. But as I'm going down the path, my analytical brain keeps telling me, you know, think it over, think it again, even though you do follow your intuition path consciously, carefully, you know, making the right decisions. And so sometimes I find it hard to quiet the thinking brain so I can just flow with the decisions that I've made, which have turned out, you know, and are great decisions. But sometimes there's that nagging brain
Right.
still, you know, say, is it correct? Are you doing the right thing, et cetera?
Well, we want to be responsible, and you are looking for validation. And you know, unless it was like, oh, I shouldn't have trusted my gut. That was an absolute disastrous decision. So I think that's that balance again. And sometimes the thinking brain is coming from that place of trying to protect us and coming out of fear. So it's like, well, you better be careful. And so there's got to be that point with, well, you know, like where we value it, and it's like, well, thank you for that, but you know, I trust this. It's working for me. I think it's trial and and experiment. It's proven itself to you more times than not that your gut didn't steer you wrong. So I think, you know, we value it on that. Yeah, Diane.
I kind of think the intuitiveness within me is the God spirit within me that I'm acknowledging. And I don't know that I put it so much into my intuition, but my connection with the God spirit that's with me, that is the intuitive
Right.
voice within me.
And it has proven itself to you that you can trust it and rely upon it.
Yes.
That it's been for your highest good. It's worked out for the best in all the times that you've trusted that nudge or that inner voice.
Yep.
So, I mean, you know, part of it is us being open and knowing that it's not, like I said, all one or the other, that we can draw from both. All right. Well, thank you. If there's nothing else, so